Hello, my name is Louise Williams, and I'm an independent child protection expert based in the United Kingdom. Today, I'm going to be taking you through a presentation entitled Fabricated or Induced Illness, an exploration of issues within the United Kingdom. There are no disclosures to declare. So I would like to start with a quote by Donald Miller that reads, "In the age of information, ignorance is a choice." It is really important for professionals to access the information relating to Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome that is available both widely on the internet from professionals in a peer manner, and also to access training in relation to Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome in order to promote best outcomes for children. So what is fabricated or induced illness? So this is the definition, a very short definition that I'm going to take you through that highlights the key points. Fabricated or induced illness, or FII, was previously known and is more commonly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Historically, the definition of FII relates to a parent or caregiver exaggerating symptoms or inducing illness in a child for some sort of gain, such as emotional or financial. Reporting an over-medicalization of symptoms not seen or seen more mildly by others. Parental anxiety being projected onto the child as the parent or caregiver holds incorrect beliefs or is over-anxious regarding their child's alleged needs. The child is often unnecessarily exposed to a large number of appointments or assessments by multiple professionals as the parent or caregiver seeks to misplaced anxiety. Rarely the parent or caregiver may induce illness in the child. So here in the center of the screen, we have a quote from Dr. Alison Steele, who is Officer for Safeguarding at the RCPCH, that's the Royal College of Paediatric and Child Health. And this is the new guidance on perplexing presentations and fabricated or induced illness in children. And this was published by them on the 2nd of March 2021, this statement. It is very rare for parents or caregivers to deliberately induce illness in a child by, for example, poisoning them or withholding treatment. Most cases are based on incorrect beliefs or misplaced anxiety, which unchecked can cause children to undergo harms ranging from missing school and seeing friends to undergoing unnecessary and painful or even harmful tests or treatments. It clearly defines some of the issues that are arising in the UK today. It remains incredibly rare for a parent or caregiver to induce illness in a child, for example, by the induction of salt, sugar, or other substances. However, incorrect beliefs or misplaced anxiety can cause significant emotional harm. This is normally via the child being over-medicalized or prevented from living life as best possible with their peers. So within the new guidance, in the center of the screen here, we have the definition that's contained within it for medically unexplained symptoms, and this is often abbreviated to MUS. The child's symptoms of which the child complains and which are genuinely experienced are not fully explained by any known pathology, but with likely underlying factors in the child, usually of a psychosocial nature. And the parents acknowledge this to be the case. The health professionals and parents work collaboratively to achieve evidence-based therapeutic work in the best interests of the child or young person. Medically unexplained symptoms can also be described as functional disorders and are abnormal bodily sensations which cause pain and disability by affecting the normal functioning of the body. We then also have, again within perplexing presentations, fabricated or induced illness in children, the RCPCH guidance, perplexing presentations, contained here on the center of the screen, stating presence of alerting signs when the actual state of the child's physical or mental health is not yet clear, but there is no perceived risk of immediate serious harm to the child's physical health or life. Also, we have a very clear definition of fabricated or induced illness, again given within this guidance. And in the centre of the screen, I will read you through it. And it states, FII is a clinical situation in which a child is or is very likely to be harmed due to parents' behaviour and action carried out in order to convince doctors that the child's state of physical and or mental health or neurodevelopment is impaired or more impaired than is actually the case. FII results in emotional and physical abuse and neglect, including iatrogenic harm. So what are the potential issues in relation to the FII guidance in Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome? So Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is a multi-systemic condition in which the average time to obtain a correct diagnosis is 10 years, often leading symptoms to be unexplained. A multidisciplinary approach is required, which can make it appear as if the parent or caregiver is doctor shopping, moving around different professionals. Often, an Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome diagnosis arises following private consultation with a specialist rather than within the NHS, thus making diagnosis difficult to obtain for some. An unconscious bias is often reported in the medical field relating to Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, affecting objective assessment and diagnosis. And children with undiagnosed Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome may fall under the term perplexing presentation or medically unexplained symptoms, yet then fail to obtain a correct diagnosis within the NHS to mitigate any safeguarding concerns which are raised. It is also worth noting that adults with EDS will comment that whilst the course of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is unpredictable and varies between individuals, in some instances, preventative assistance can be invaluable, particularly to avoid damage to joints from multiple dislocations and also to receive pain and fatigue management. We know that children with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome often experience pain, fatigue, subluxations and dislocations and a variety of comorbidities, but effective management flowing into good communication with the educational setting and correct diagnosis could really help to improve outcomes for children. So why do we see repeated allegations of FII? So even when safeguarding concerns raised against parents or caregivers are quashed, there has historically been no formal pathway to support after accusation. The new guidance seems to address this, but the effectiveness remains to be assessed. So here we have a very simple diagram of why do we see repeated allegations of FII, and it's an example of a cyclic pattern of trauma. So it can start off with a false allegation of fabricated or induced illness and children's services involvement, then leading into child protection proceedings with little or non-existent support to the family whilst this is taking place. This then leads to trauma as a result of the family being accused and perhaps sometimes even medical intervention being stopped during this process. The case in instances where safeguarding concerns have been unfounded or allegations have been unfounded, the case is closed with no support to the family. There can be emotional and financial damage, particularly if a parent has had to stop work if proceedings have interfered with them, perhaps needing to work in a sector where they're working with vulnerable children or vulnerable adults, thus preventing such. It can cause broken relationships with professionals and then still no support, even when the allegation or the case against the parents is closed. The family can be left with a high degree of trauma and lack of trust in medical professionals, which then can directly lead to them red flagging themselves again. And then this then restarts the cyclic pattern of trauma and parents continually being reaccused. So, in the perplexing presentations, fabricated or induced illness in children, RCPH guidance on page 14, I quote here from the centre of the screen, in their reports, the parents may not be actually intending to deceive, such as when they hold incorrect beliefs and are over-anxious to the child's detriment. Parental anxiety poses one of the growing threats of significant emotional harm to children, as many behaviours that can be categorised as FII have anxiety as the causative factor. This can cause a parent to act erratically, such as keeping a child off school or moving around professionals in a bid to seek validation or evade safeguarding concerns. This impact on daily living and over-medicalisation can cause significant harm as the parent or caregiver desperately seeks a diagnosis. And whilst, of course, this is caused by lack of diagnosis often occurring within the NHS, it is imperative that we do recognise that some of these parental behaviours that do arise from that are causing significant harm and are genuine safeguarding concerns. So even when a concern of FII, original concern, and the case has been quashed and the case is being closed, there can be further children's services referrals and involvement because the parental behaviour in itself is then causing a concern via projected anxiety. So this leads into when behaviours relating to trauma and parental experiences are harmful. So this is projection of parental anxiety, allowing experiences of historical parental medical care or mental health to be projected onto a child. Of course, this again leads back to the need for better diagnostics within the NHS, and of course, parents will naturally try to protect their children from experiencing the same as them. Unnecessary overprotection of the child, preventing them from enjoying daily living or schooling in line with their peers. Not having due diligence in relation to garnering correct professional advice, which may lead to inflammatory advice being taken from non-professionals, promoting actions which may raise further concern. It is very common for professionals to report seeing parents taking rather inflammatory advice or incorrect advice from perhaps strangers they have met on the internet, or perhaps from others that are going through the same thing. It is really important that people's own experiences are not projected onto others, and every case is looked at completely objectively and singularly in the best interest of the child. There can also be failure to engage with professionals in a cohesive manner, again due to the trauma that's been caused, and a desperation to be believed, causing a child to be erratically exposed to over-medicalisation as they are moved between professionals trying to quash that safeguarding concern. But the same way, if there was better diagnostics within the NHS, this could perhaps be, of course, could be prevented. So we have now an anonymised case study. It's important for professionals in the local authority and children's services to pay particular attention to this case study because it encompasses many of the triggers for accusations of FII that parents and caregivers do report as occurring. And this is one that actually did occur and covers many of what parents report. So a child was under medical investigation for unexplained symptoms relating to the immune system. The mother raises concerns regarding treatment and asks for consideration of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome as a separate issue. The consultant whom the concern was raised against changes behaviour towards the mother. The mother and the child are diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome by a private geneticist who then also locates the gene mutation relating to the immune system. Now, this gene was not located by the NHS, but was located within the private sector and was thought to be explanatory of the symptoms. Children's services become involved elsewhere due to mothers seeking help for a domestic matter and falsely claiming a report that fabricated or induced illness has been alleged when it has not been alleged formally by the consultant or any other professionals. A complaint is raised with children's services, the report is amended and apologies are received, and the case is closed, with children's services deeming no safeguarding concerns regarding the child or mother. The consultant is later found to have committed maladministration by the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman in relation to a data matter, and the mother later receives a 5-figure sum in compensation from the local authority in relation to data protection matters. So why is this case important? Well, it of course encompasses hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and the difficulty in obtaining a diagnosis within the NHS. Unexplained symptoms followed by an organic cause being identified within the private sector, a change in professional behaviour following a complaint, maladministration, bias towards private healthcare and Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, a bias towards an articulate mother who was able to raise complaints and also able to raise a successful legal challenge, and also data protection concerns, which are often reported by parents who then have to exercise their right to rectification via GDPR in order to correct any incorrect information that has been held on their records. So, what can we do better? So we must improve diagnostic pathways within the NHS. We must address the unconscious bias that is preventing those with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome from receiving a timely and a correct diagnosis. We must acknowledge triggers for acrimonious or vexatious accusations, perhaps after a complaint has been raised against school or a medical professional, and increase in knowledge within the education and local authority sectors in relation to Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. We must deal better with parental anxiety or misplaced beliefs to mitigate the risk of projection onto children, which of course is known to cause significant emotional harm and can then be a cause for concern that arises later within its own right. Implement increased early appropriate multidisciplinary paediatric intervention. Now, this can be in the form of correct diagnosis, physiotherapy, appropriate gastro care, and of course, this then is going to improve the outcomes for children, including within their education. We must consider that if we are withholding correct diagnosis or stopping or perhaps impeding that from occurring, must actually consider, is that causing the child actually harm because of the fact they're not receiving the correct intervention that would allow them to live life as best possible in line with their peers? And we must ensure that local authorities have a curious and objective approach. It would be really important perhaps to look at this slide and the one before, and perhaps consider if any of those issues have occurred around a referral. So perhaps they can unpick the reason for the referral and whether perhaps it is vexatious or based on a genuine concern. So I'd like to finish with a quote from Professor Rodney Graham, which reads, "No other disease in the history of modern medicine has been neglected in such a way as Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. The unconscious bias towards Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome in medical sectors must not hinder local authorities from taking an inquisitive and objective approach to accusations of fabricated or induced illness. Children with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome should be supported to live life as best possible in line with their peers, facilitated by appropriate early intervention for their needs where needed in order to promote best outcomes." And I'm sure that everyone will agree that is what everyone is currently seeking. Thank you very much for listening.